All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our Plugged In webinar series. Thank you for attending today's Questline Digital webinar, Data Privacy and Personalization. My name is Maureen Murky, and I'm the technical producer and host for today's webinar. At Questline Digital, we're focused on bringing value to energy providers by improving the customer experience and achieving program goals. Before we begin, we want to cover a few important housekeeping items with you. So first, we love an engaged audience. If you have any questions during the webcast, we encourage you to submit them in our Q&A section, which is located at the lower right of the presentation window. Don't be shy. Our presenters love questions. In fact, we are doing a Knock Our Socks Off promotion, where if you ask a question during today's discussion, you will receive a free, yes, free pair of Questline Digital socks. Woo! We'll try to answer all the questions during the webcast, but if a more in-depth answer is needed or we run out of time, we'll connect with you via email after the webinar. We will also conduct poll questions throughout the presentation. We hope you'll join in the fun and participate. These polls will help all of us discover valuable insights and key takeaways on today's topic. To view those poll results, you can access the polls tab to the left of your screen. Habla usted español? Parlez-vous français? English not your native language? That's okay. Check out our closed captioning feature for more options. We have 12 languages available. Next, we want to ensure that your webinar experience is as seamless as possible. Since some networks may cause slides to advance more slowly than others, we recommend logging off of your VPN. If your slides do fall behind, you should simply press F5 to refresh the page. If you're a Mac user, use Command R. It's that easy. Finally, look for a follow-up email in your inbox this week. You'll receive the PowerPoint presentation and a playback link to the webinar recording. Please be aware that you are not the only participant today. The names of the other attendees are not being shown to you for privacy. Now, let me introduce our presenters for today. Brian Lindamood is VP of Marketing and Content Strategy at Questline Digital. He leads the team that delivers engaging educational content solutions and digital marketing campaigns for energy utilities. Previously, Brian was Director of Content Marketing for Manta Media, one of the largest online communities for small business owners, where he worked to empower business owners with expert advice and educational resources around digital marketing. As Director of Content at BlastPoint, Marianne Holohan is passionate about making data-driven insights accessible and actionable. With that goal in mind, she orchestrates content strategy and creation, from marketing campaigns to customer-facing product documentation and training. A big-picture thinker with a passion for collaborative processes, she brings people-focused insight and a literary edge to data analytics, as she spent 10+ years teaching writing and literature at the college level. Marianne lives in Pittsburgh, PA, with her family. Now, in today's webinar, we'll hear from Brian and Marianne about exactly what personalization is, how it differs from segmentation, the benefits of each, and insights into data privacy and legal considerations. We'll see a lot of examples throughout the show that show opportunities for energy utilities to personalize and segment communications. We'll then end with a 15-minute Q&A discussion to learn more. Socks, again, they're on the line. Before I pass it off to Brian and Marianne to get us started, I'd like to begin today's discussion with a poll question. So I will go ahead and get that launched for you. The question is, has your utility done any personalization? Yes, no, or maybe you are interested. I will give it a minute to get those answers in. Remember, get your thinking caps on. Those pairs of socks are on the line. All right, those answers are coming in. Thank you all so much for participating today. Give it just another minute. Okay, these responses are still moving. Okay, it does look like they've slowed down. I'll go ahead and close that poll. Remember, you can see these results at any time in your polls tab. So it does look like most of you have done some personalization, which is great to see. Hopefully today's session will give you some more ideas and examples of how you can continue to personalize communications. So with that, I will go ahead and pass it off to Brian and Marianne to tell us more. Take it away.
Thank you, Maureen, for that great introduction. And I'm going to, again, thank Marianne as well for joining us today. BlastPoint has really been a great partner for us to work with, as well as I know with many utilities and others in the industry. They're really at the forefront of the issues that we're discussing today. So I appreciate Marianne being here to provide that perspective and that expertise.
Thanks. Excited to be here.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Much like BlastPoint, I'm sure all of you know that Questline Digital has been a strong advocate for energy providers to leverage data-driven strategies in their marketing. Our industry is getting more complex by the day. Customer choice and customer control over their energy use is growing. And energy providers are really facing a huge need to educate customers about these changes. To meet that challenge, I think it's absolutely critical for energy providers to use data and personalization to improve the customer experience. So what are we really talking about here? Personalization is a strategic approach that uses data to create a customer experience that's unique and responsive to each customer's preferences. That means when you send a message to a customer, that message reflects what you know about them. The content includes topics they're interested in or a benefits message that's relevant to them. The channel, whether that's email or text or another channel, is that customer's preferred channel. And of course, that all starts with data. You need to listen to your customers' needs and interests so you can learn what they like. And you do that by capturing the digital communications they engage with, the programs they've signed up for, how they use energy, and lots of other data sources that Marianne is going to dig into for us here in a minute. I also want to note, we're going to be talking about both personalization and segmentation, and those terms are often used together. They're really two sides of the same coin. So I want to kind of explain the difference a little bit. Personalization means targeting your message to a specific individual. And that typically means that you're including some piece of information, their name, their energy use, their outstanding balance, that's unique to them. Segmentation, on the other hand, is when you group customers together based on shared characteristics. So, commonly this could be anywhere from 2 to 5 or 6 different segments for a different campaign or program or topic. So, a segment is a group of people who are interested in the same topic or eligible for a certain program, or, they're all likely to be interested in buying an electric vehicle, as an example. Personalization and segmentation work really well together. And I think campaigns are most effective when you create segments based on the relevance of a program or the motivations those customers have. And then you personalize some piece of information for each customer within those segments. A great example is a campaign to promote a new rate plan. You want to create segments around customers who would benefit from the new rate, or maybe you want to exclude, for now, a segment of customers who would not benefit from the rate. And then you can have personalized information within those segments to tell each individual customer exactly how much they would save on that rate, as an example. So why is any of this important to us? Why go to the trouble, right? Well, first and foremost, relevant communications is a basic customer expectation these days. Every single business is using data to personalize the customer experience in some way. And customers expect the same from their energy provider. The fact is, customers like receiving messages they're interested in, and they don't want to waste their time with messages that they aren't interested in. When it comes to customer satisfaction, which is loyal, when your customers see that you care about them, when you demonstrate that you know your customers, when your messages are relevant to their interests, answer their questions, solve their needs, they are going to be happier and more satisfied in their relationship with you. For energy providers, that translates into a marketing strategy that's more effective because you're getting the right message in front of the right customers. This also drives higher engagement with your communications and ultimately higher conversion rates for your programs and services. So you can promote electric vehicles to customers who are likely to be interested in EVs, and you can promote them in different ways, depending on if the customer is interested in saving money or high-tech performance. You can sell smart chargers to customers who just bought an EV, and you can promote your EV rate to customers who just installed a charger, along with the exact amount of money they could save on the rate plan. And then at each one of these steps, you're reaching the right customers with a relevant, personalized message, increasing conversion rates and you're not wasting anyone's time or annoying customers who would not be interested in these messages. That's the kind of digital relationship that leads to customer satisfaction. So I know that sounds easy. It's easy for me to say, right? I'd like to turn it over to Marianne now, who's going to tell us more about how that's actually accomplished and the data that you can use to build a segmentation strategy.
Thanks, Brian. And I want to apologize in advance if I need to stop and take a sip of tea. I have the cold that everyone in the Northeast has had this month. So yes, as Brian mentioned, personalization requires understanding customers' unique needs and preferences. And because we can't talk to every single customer to ask them about these, utilizing data to understand customers is an absolute must. In 2023, most individuals have a fairly detailed data imprint that's out there, whether we like it or not. And much of that is based on consumer activity, whether it's at your company or at other companies that they interact with. So being able to access and activate that data makes personalization possible. The process of sourcing, prepping, analyzing, and activating data, which you see on this slide, it seems a bit complicated, and I'm not going to lie to you, it is. That's one of the reasons why BlastPoint exists. But we do want to stress that it's a lot more attainable than a lot of people think that it is. Some people kind of assume that it's out of reach to be able to enter into this kind of process to get to the point where you can personalize, and it's absolutely not. It's actually simpler than it seems. So just in a nutshell, I'll walk you through the process that BlastPoint goes through with our utility partners to get them from just having data to getting to the point of activating that data to actually be able to personalize messages to customers. So one thing, and you'll see over on the left-hand side, we have different types of objectives. At BlastPoint, we like to start with objectives that utilities are trying to accomplish. We find that that kind of clarifies this process and takes some of the confusion out of it. So once we have kind of determined an objective or a series of objectives, we get to work and determine what types of internal data are needed. So we go ahead and collect data from our utility partners. We make sure that we understand that data, that we're transferring it securely, and that it is in a format that's actually usable for us to do analysis. So we like to use, in marketing, we like to use lots of little images of data scientists with a broom sweeping up data. It's a little more complicated than that, but it basically means we go through the data, we make sure that things aren't replicated, that shouldn't be replicated, that we get a sense of how many nulls there are or blank spots or other types of issues that could throw off analysis, and we fix them if possible. At that point, we're ready to move on to appending third-party data to internal data. So what we do is we determine what types of third-party data can help the utility understand customers for that particular objective. Because remember, the more you can understand customers, the more you can personalize. We handle sourcing that data and integrating it with a utility's internal data. And this often involves purchasing that third-party data that matches internal customer records. And we'll talk more about third-party data in a minute. Once we've appended that third-party data to internal data, it's ready for analysis. And we utilize at BlastPoint AI-powered modeling to find the target customers for specific initiatives. We then segment those customers, creating specific data profiles that include a demographic overview, a utility engagement snapshot, and best channels for communication so that you're ready to hit the ground running with personalization. We like to call those data-driven personas to help you understand who you're trying to reach and then to actually go ahead and reach them. And then finally, we at BlastPoint make the activation piece easier through our platform, where customers can access, our utility customers can access our AI-powered segments, as well as creating their own segments based on different data points, depending on what their objectives are. Usually activation includes personalizing campaign content for target customers based on data analysis. So I basically just took a complicated process there, boiled it down to a few steps. It's more complicated than that, and I'm happy to talk more if anyone wants to reach out after. But so a big part of this, of activating insights, is segmentation, as Brian mentioned. Segmentation is a very important personalization tool. It's a way to organize customers into groups based on shared data profiles. Many people we've found think of segmentation as sort of a one and done situation where you segment your customers broadly and then you use those segments kind of over and over again to reach different objectives. And that's certainly one way that you can handle it. However, we found that objective-driven segmentation is a much more effective personalization tool. With this approach, we start with that objective, and it can be a lot of different things or a series of objectives. And an example that we have here would be LIHEAP enrollment, trying to get more customers enrolled in LIHEAP programs and getting those LIHEAP grants. We then utilize internal data, such as previous LIHEAP engagement, and external data, such as demographics and advertising channel preferences, to create distinct target segments for LIHEAP campaigns. And what you're looking at over on the right-hand side are 3 sample LIHEAP segments with distinct data profiles. So each of these has a high likelihood of enrolling in LIHEAP according to our analysis, but they have different life circumstances and channel preferences that are going to make personalization important for reaching these customers. So with these data profiles that correspond with these segments, instead of just sending out, one email to all of these customers that are likely to enroll, you're dividing that up further, and you're saying, what's the best way for me to actually reach each of these folks and make sure that they are aware of their LIHEAP options? And so you can see that when we look at some of these examples, we see that some of them, excuse me, have different life situations. Like the first group, we found that a lot of them were retired. They're experiencing unforeseen economic hardships, and they really respond to snail mail. Whereas the next group of people, they tend to pay on time, but they have intermittent misses, and they prefer text or email notifications. Where the last group, they owe the most, they default a lot on their payments, they have a history of shutoffs, but they're very high Facebook users and radio listeners. So those present us with distinct ways to actually personalize messaging to reach that objective, which is to get more of these folks to actually sign up for LIHEAP. And in that little screen, you'll see that this is a way to engage with that data via the BlastPoint platform. You'll see that we looked at one of these segments and saw that one of them also had quite a preference for primetime TV. So just a way to understand how you can best reach these folks. So now we'll dig in a little bit to third-party data for personalization. And couple things to note about third-party data. There's actually a lot we could say about it. One of the members of our team has probably a book he could write about it. But just a couple of notes. A lot of people have questions about this. What types of third-party data are available? Where do we get it? And what are the privacy risks? So I won't be able to, answer every question today, but I do want to just kind of hit some major things here. Third-party data in most cases is consumer data purchased from data vendors. Most of the time it does need to be purchased. There are actually free data sources out there that you can also tap into, but a lot of the time it must be purchased from data vendors. There are thousands of these vendors. Some are a lot more reputable than others. We'll get to that part in a minute. There are also seemingly infinite number of data sets that you can source, which can feel overwhelming. That's another reason for BlastPoint's existence. But when we start with specific objectives, it becomes a little bit clearer which types of third-party data will be most useful for what you're trying to accomplish and how to personalize to specific customers. So what we're looking at on this slide is just a small sample of the various types of data that are out there. And the types of third-party data that I've added to this slide are essentially types of data that we see a lot of our utility partners being interested in and utilizing. So we have first residential customer demographics, things like housing, income, professions, vehicles, lots of things that are sourced from census data. So this is freely available data. It's just a matter of getting it and being able to use it. We also have some data that for C&I customers as well, such as NAICS codes, business size, location information, utility costs, transportation costs, things like that. There's financial data out there, such as credit scores. There's financial stability scores that you can get on customers. There's also an underbanked score, which is kind of interesting to see at what level customers are participating in financial products. There's also a lot on media engagement. So there's just a couple things here in terms of advertising channels. We find that this data can be very helpful for some of our partners, looking at where are people engaging the most with advertisement. Also social media, how are people engaging? What networks are they engaging with the most? There's data out there about like, hey, who's most likely to be posting photos or videos or texts? So you can kind of take a deep dive in some ways into people's social media engagement. There's also lots of different types of psychographic data. And this is basically people's consumer choices. So some are purchasing preferences. How are they likely to purchase things? Political and charitable behavior. So are they donating to political or environmental or charitable causes? Hobbies and interests. Are they interested in hunting and fishing, electronics, music, and the arts? There's lots of information out there about that. And then also energy consumer data. So do they have what's considered green affinity? Or do they prioritize energy comfort? Do they have a preference for energy technology? So these are just some things that some third-party data that you can get that can be helpful with sort of filling in those data profiles for customers. And of course, following that, we want to talk a little bit about legal considerations for third-party data as well. So when we're thinking about third-party data, if it is sourced and used correctly, it is very secure. So there's two ways to kind of think about whether the data is being used securely. The first one is kind of by dividing it into incoming data and outgoing data. So when we're thinking about incoming third-party data, this is data that we're purchasing from third-party vendors. There's kind of two major types. One is personally specific data. That's data that is very much tied to an individual and can be kind of directly tied back to them. And there's also modeled or inferred data, which is more indirect. Often third-party vendors will use their own modeling to take a little bit of data that they have about a small segment of the population, and then they'll sort of like extrapolate that onto a larger data set based on census data. So for the first kind, for personally specific data, we want to make sure that we're asking the data vendor to validate their permission to use data. That's really important. Every data vendor should be able to answer that question. If they can't, it's probably better not to work with them. For modeled or inferred data, this is data that is less accurate because it's less directly tied to a specific individual. So mostly with this, it's better to ensure that your organization isn't relying on it too heavily, that we can use it, but we don't want to be making too many major decisions based specifically on that data alone. When we're thinking about outgoing data, this is when we're talking about sharing customer data with third-party vendors. We want to limit the scope of the data being shared, especially if it includes personal identifiable information. So this is another reason why we really like being sort of objective focused, because instead of taking a whole bunch of data and saying, here you go, it's being a lot more specific about the types of data that you're going to share and being intentional about that. Another thing that's very important is to review vendors' data security practices to ensure legality. And there is legality for transferring data to third-party vendors. It's just that it's important to ask them to validate their practices. So BlastPoint, as someone who shares data and gets data shared with us, we have to validate our security practices. And that's something that we do when we are asked to do that. If someone can't do that, then again, you should kind of think twice about working with them. So that's kind of these considerations in a nutshell.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Let's give Marianne and Brian a breather really quick, and let's do another poll question before we jump into some examples from both of them. So I will launch that question for you. Our question this time is, what are your biggest challenges with segmentation? Maybe it's data management, privacy concerns, internal resources, cost concerns, technology hurdles, lack of data, or other. You can choose whichever options fit your situation best. And if none of these are hitting home for you, feel free to choose that other option, and I can launch a secondary poll to see what that other may be. So I will leave that open for a minute to let those responses roll in. I'm going to say it again. Ask a question, you get socks. Socks, socks, socks. You will hear that from me a lot today. So, all right, the questions or the responses are rolling in. I'll give it just another minute here. They are all over the place. Okay, all right. So it looks like they're slowing down. I will go ahead and close this. You can review that in the closed poll. It looks like a lot of the challenges are data management, leading the way, second with technology hurdles, and then privacy concerns. We did have an other, so I'll go ahead and open that other. If you would like to, feel free to let us know what that other is. What challenge are you seeing when you try to segment or are looking into segmenting your communications? I'll give it just a minute. All right, I'll go ahead and close that out, and we'll move on to our examples. Brian and Marianne, take it away.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Maureen. We do have some great examples to share of putting these customer segments to work to support specific programs or initiatives. The first we want to look at here is energy efficiency. This is certainly one of the most common program areas for utilities. I'm sure you're probably going to reach all of your customers with an efficiency message at some point, but not all of your customers are interested in the same message. Some programs are more relevant or less relevant to some customers. Some customers may not even be eligible for all programs. And then even within a given program, customers have different motivations or reasons for participating. So if you do send the same message to everyone, it's going to fall flat with a lot of people. You really want to make sure that you're leveraging these segments to increase the response, increase the conversion, and the participation ultimately. So, Marianne, I know you have an example to share of an analysis that BlastPoint did around this kind of program.
Sorry, go back. All right. Yes. So we worked with one of our utility partners who wanted to provide relevant EE programs to their customers and also identify income eligible households specifically. So when we were approaching this project, we thought about, what kind of data we needed to source from them, as well as what sort of third-party data we wanted to source as well. So just a couple of examples here in terms of internal residential data. We got some data from them about past EE engagement, as well as other sort of relevant program data, as well as energy usage. So those were things we got from the utility. And then we also appended that with some psychographic data, such as green consumer data, financial data, as well as ad engagement channels, as well as demographic data around housing, because housing type is very important, as well as household income, which is important for establishing income eligibility. So once we had that, we were able to analyze this data, and we created EE customer segments for all customers, but we also focused on income eligible segments. And we found specifically a target segment with the data profile that you can see on screen. A couple notable things about this segment that were very useful for personalization were that we noticed there were a higher than average percentage of single parent households within this segment. They had very high energy usage and bills. And they also had very high assistance program engagement. So they were already engaging with the utility around assistance programs. And we saw that they had high Facebook and radio engagement as well. So with those things engaged, we were able to give the utility secure access to this data. And you'll see an example of their Facebook score on the screen there. And they were able to effectively target more people who were income eligible for these programs and saw 47% more income eligible customers engaged in EE as a result.
Nice.
So Brian, I'll let you.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great example. This is a different example, another campaign where we took a segmented approach for a smart thermostat program. So here we have two different messages from the same campaign. The message on the left is targeted to customers who are green conscious and motivated to save the environment, while the message on the right is segmented for customers who are motivated to save money. This is the exact same program, the same offer ultimately, but two different benefits that we're promoting that are going to appeal to these two different segments. Along the same lines, when you think about EV adoption, there are a number of motivations that customers might have for buying an electric vehicle and a number of hurdles or objections that might stand in the way of that. So, each one of these data points is an opportunity for segmentation to address the different interests that each group of these customers has. So, Marianne, do you want to share your example here?
Yeah, similar format here, but around EVs instead. So our utility partner had the goal of increasing awareness of and enrollment in their EV programs. And they also specifically wanted to increase engagement with their web-based EV purchasing tool. So in terms of sourcing data for this, internal data that we used were previous green program engagement beyond just EV, past EV program adoption data, energy usage data as well, since that can also be important for identifying who is using an EV, charging it every day. In terms of psychographic data, we used some green consumer data, as well as ad channel engagement. And then for demographics, we used household income and size, housing data, because that's also important for knowing who can install a charger, as well as education data as well, as our model kind of identified that as an important indicator of who is going to buy an EV. So in terms of activating those insights, we created essentially three main segments: people who are ready to adopt now, adopt soon, and adopt much later. And we found that for this particular partner, about 27% of customers were ready to adopt EVs. So based on that target segment, we noticed that a lot of these folks had more than one vehicle. They had either a BA or BS in college or higher, a lot of grad school degrees, a lot of white collar careers, and living in single family homes. So they were able to target this specific group of people. And you'll see on the screen that we saw that this group of people was very engaged with cell phone ads. And they were able to meet their goals, the 98% enrollment increase in their variable rate program, 55% enrollment increase in their EV rebate program, and then a 500% increase in EV web page views. So good results from them. Brian, do you want to talk specifically about your ads?
Yeah, so this is a different campaign that we have been working on for several years. It started with the utility's need to identify EV owners in their service territory and understand more about them. This started, as I said, several years ago, and they didn't, to begin with, didn't even have a baseline of who were their EV owners. We reached out through a number of different channels and directed customers to an online survey. So this is, email, text, social, other snail mail. We did some direct mail postcards, really casting a wide net to get potential EV owners to participate in this survey, where we could capture their preferences on charging, billing, and other topics. We then use this data to develop targeted campaigns, first to promote a smart charger rebate, and then later to promote EV rate programs. So you can see the back and forth that can be behind a personalized campaign like this. In this case, the utility did not have some of the data that Marianne was referring to. So they just went out and asked their customers for their preferences on a survey. They got the data, which helped the campaign, obviously, but I think there's also an unintended benefit there where the customer feels heard. The customer sees that you're listening to them and then responding to their needs with relevant programs. I think segmentation is really critical for payment assistance or low and medium income programs, LMI programs. This group has a reputation for being hard to reach. I'm sure we all know that. And when you do reach them, I think it's really important to maintain that engagement as their needs change, or maybe as their program eligibility changes from year to year. So, first of all, you want to segment campaigns so that you're only communicating with those who are eligible or likely to be eligible for each program. And then within those segments, you probably want to have different messaging for past participants versus new participants who are going to need more education about the program. Past participants, you may have a simple renewal campaign. This is, the annual window to sign up for LIHEAP. If you've participated in the past, you're familiar with it. If you haven't participated, but you may be eligible, that's where the education campaign is needed. But how do you find these customers who are eligible for these programs? That is one of the huge challenges with this audience. And Marianne, I know that you have a great example to share about this.
Sure. Yeah. So it's kind of interesting, but about 30% of customers aren't aware of payment assistance options. So that, with that kind of looming out there, our utility partner really wanted to identify customers who are most likely to need assistance programs and then increase awareness of those programs within that customer base. So in terms of data, some of the same ones that we've mentioned for others, but we looked specifically internally at assistance program enrollment, historical data about that and activity, payment and collections data also. In terms of psychographic data, we looked at ad channels and financial data again. And then for demographic data, we looked specifically at household income and size, and also housing data, as those things are important for being eligible for some of these programs as well. In terms of activating insights, we actually created specific customer segments around both of these programs. So we looked at them somewhat separately in terms of LIHEAP and CAP, and which is what this utility partner was looking to get in further enrollments in. So we had two target segments, the high propensity for CAP, high propensity for LIHEAP. We saw that while there was some overlap with these, there were some differences as well. We saw that the LIHEAP segment, there were a lot more homeowners there, interestingly, and a lot more likely to be retired. So with these segments identified, secure data access, you can see that we found some information and made that available to them about channel preferences, as well as including who has an email on file and who doesn't. So with that, they were able to get some really good results. They doubled LIHEAP grants in 2022. CAP engagement went through the roof, 670% increase over industry benchmarks. They had 9 percentile points above industry benchmarks for email open and click rates, and their assistance webpage engagement more than doubled by just targeting people who we found were most relevant and most interested for these particular programs.
Yeah, so here's an example of another program, a payment arrangement program campaign that we worked on that was sent to eligible customers with past due balances. So this is a good example of using both segmentation and personalization in a campaign. So the segments were built around program eligibility, and then each message was personalized with the customer's name, the customer's account number, and then the past due balance was within the body of the email. Another element here that I think is really important for all program promotions, but LMI promotions especially, make it as easy as possible to sign up for the program. In this campaign, the enrollment link took the customer to what we call a one-click sign-up page. So this web page is already pre-populated with the customer's name and account information, and then the customer can just select which payment plan they would like and enroll with just one click. This campaign had an incredibly high conversion rate. It was extremely successful for the utility. And I attribute that success to the segmentation and the personalization, both in the email and the conversion page. And we took all of the friction out of the sign-up process, and it worked. So before we wrap things up here, I'd like to ask Marianne to address a final, very important topic, which is how do you make sure your customers aren't annoyed when we use their data like this?
Yeah, and just very quickly, because I want to make sure we have time for questions, we kind of identified 3 major customer expectations that they have when it comes to usage of their data. The first is obviously don't leak my data. Next, don't gather more about me than you need to know. And also, finally, the most important one is the data that you're gathering should benefit me, not annoy me. And so a lot of the things that we've talked about here help to address that. So with the don't leak, make sure you're validating those third-party organizations' security practices. Using objective-driven and targeted segments actually helps you limit the amount of customer data that you're using and transferring. And then finally, with that last one, making data actionable helps you to personalize, which makes customers happier. So those are ways to kind of address those major concerns.
Awesome. I'm going to jump back in here. Thank you a lot, Brian and Marianne. Before we jump into our Q&A, I do have one final poll question I wanted to push out to everybody. So I'll start polling now. The question is, what tool would help your personalization efforts the most? Would it be third-party data, data analysis and segmentation, channel optimization, or maybe you need all of the above? So go ahead and choose one of those options. And I'll give it a minute here to do that. As we jump into Q&A, I'm going to say it again. Stocks are on the line. Very exciting. Okay, it does look like the responses are slowing down a bit here, so I'll go ahead and close that out. It looks like I need all of the above is the top response here. So hopefully some of what Brian and Marianne talked about today will help with some of those. So without further ado, let's go ahead and go into Q&A. We do have a few questions here. Let's see. We'll start here with a question from Seth to Marianne. It says, can you give an example of a successful personalized messaging campaign? What were the key factors that made this effective?
Yes, absolutely. So one partner that we worked with wanted to launch their chatbot. They wanted to launch a chatbot in order to get some of customers routed away from their call center, especially over the last couple of years, because call centers have been very busy. So we did an analysis of customers who were most likely to want to use this chatbot. And one of the things that we noticed about one of the target segments was that they also tended to be single parents. There were more single parents in those segments than in the rest of the customer population. And so they used a lot of creative to address that. So a lot of the images that they were using in their advertising were of a single parent. And because this was during the pandemic, a single parent kind of working at home with their child nearby. And we also found that Facebook was, the top engaged channel for that group as well. So it was Facebook advertisements with messaging and creative kind of around single parenting. And they found that that was very successful in getting people to actually engage with those advertisements.
Awesome, thank you. And Brian, did you have anything that you want to mention on that?
Yeah, it's I'll share another example of a campaign that was really successful that used both segmentation and personalization. This is a time of use rate plan that a utility was rolling out. And so we created about 5 different segments based on how the new rate plan would affect each customer. So some customers don't need to change their existing energy use, and they're going to benefit from the time of use rate plan. One of the segments was current EV owners, so there was a specific EV rate that's part of the time of use rate plan. So within each of these segments, the message is going to be different based on how the customer is going to benefit or not potentially from the rate plan based on their current energy use. The personalization element then was to include the exact amount of money that the customer could save. So, not just switch to this rate plan and you'll save money, but switch to this rate plan and you could save $125 each year, or whatever that exact amount was, which was calculated on the customer based on the customer's energy use. So that's that approach, and again, it's combining the segmentation with those personalized details really makes campaigns like that successful, because it makes it really easy for the customer to understand the program, which time of use can be complicated. So it's easy to understand. And it's also easy for the customer to sort of picture themselves participating in, picture themselves saving, because you've told them exactly how this program is going to affect them or benefit them.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Those are both great examples. I do know that we're about at time. I would like to get to one more question, but for those who have to hop off, thank you for joining us. Otherwise, let's go ahead and answer this one question before we say goodbye. So this question from Mark asks, do new channels of communication or interaction like chatbots or apps help in gathering customers' data? Our customers are hesitant in sharing personal data nowadays. I think this is a great question. Marianne, it looks like you have a thought.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I think that, so, as utilities need to obviously work within like regulations. So I know that each state will have different sort of regulations for how to approach, especially things like chatbots. I know that for our partner that we worked with, they were basically using a chatbot for people who already had sort of like a login, already had shared certain information with the utility. And so that hurdle wasn't really there for them. However, I think that, you'd need to work within some specific regulations. And I think you would also need consent if you were going to share specific data from a chatbot.
I would also draw a distinction between data collection and just listening to your customers, and so data collection is done obviously with some scientific rigor. And as Marianne touched on, there's, maybe some consent or some legal considerations with data collection, but you can always just listen to your customers, and I would sort of equate a chatbot to social listening. You should be on your Facebook page seeing what customers are saying about your utility. And that's not necessarily scientific, right? It's not like a random sample, or it's that you wouldn't use this to make any major decisions, except to pick up on sort of the trends, the topics, get a sense of the kinds of things that customers are asking about or commenting on, or that kind of thing. So I think chatbots could be used in the same way. You certainly want to pay attention to what people are saying on chatbots, and that could inform a messaging strategy or even inform program decisions. But I think it is different from what we think of as data collection, which is, has that scientific rigor, but then also does have the consent and the legal constraints.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot you can do internally just by looking at, hey, what are the major reasons why people are using the chatbot? What are the main things they're reaching out for? I think there's a lot absolutely that you can do to listen to your customers there.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. We have run out of time today. So if we did miss addressing your question, which I know that we had one more, we'll get back to you and we'll follow up offline. So we will answer that question for you. Again, thank you so much, Marianne and Brian. Your insights and advice on segmentation was amazing. This was a great discussion. I learned a lot, and I know that our audience did as well. Thank you again, audience, for attending and for those great questions. For those who asked, I'll be following up with you offline for a good address to send these amazing socks to. So look out for my email. As a reminder, the follow-up email will be sent to you shortly that has those presentation materials and the playback link for the recording today. If you have any other questions or feedback, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. There will be a brief survey at the end, so please don't close out your browser right away. We would really appreciate your feedback on today's event. Keep an eye out as well for more information on our webinar next month, which we will be promoting soon. So thank you again, everybody, and have a great day. See you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.